My name is Andrea Brown. I am the Vice President of Digital Marketing for Certiverse. We are an end-to-end self-service exam development and delivery platform. We would be happy to tell you all the ways that we can fulfill some of the needs and the processes and the things that we discussed today. It's not the main point of what we're doing today, but we would be happy to expand on that later. So feel free to get in touch with us afterwards. And so we will get started and we'll have our panelists today introduce themselves. So if Lauren, you could just tell us a little bit about why you're here.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren. I am a certification program manager at HashiCorp. I oversee more specifically our end-to-end candidate experience. So I work on attracting and converting new people to the program all the way through their exam experience and then trying to, get them to be ambassadors for us too, tell their stories. So that's why I'm here today, sort of coming at the pre and post and during exam experience. Perspective. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Ruben?
Thank you, Lauren. And my name is Ruben Garcia. I am the CEO and co-founder of Certiverse. And started the company with a team of folks, and really our focus is really on trying to build an end-to-end experience. From concept to candidate. It's really what we say, and we're focused on building. Just eliminating time cost and also making the best experience for test takers as well.
All right, so as I mentioned, we will do this in basically a Q&A format. So again, if you would like more clarification as we go, feel free to ask questions in the chat. But we will get started with our first question. So, how does the testing experience actually impact the candidate during the exam itself? How is their confidence and performance affected by that? And what are the ways that, we may unnecessarily be having an impact on that in a negative way, or some pitfalls that could be avoided that are causing stress or confusion for test takers? If Lauren, you want to start us off with that.
Sure. Yeah, I'm gonna go one step higher and think about this in three different sections, the pre-appointment experience, the appointment itself, and then the post-appointment experience. And I think it's important to look at it holistically for a few reasons, but starting with the pre-appointment experience, a common pitfall I've seen and candidly that we've done at HashiCorp is not getting candidates the right information at the right time and then in the right format. For example, if a candidate purchases an appointment and then they get the system requirements and they're like, oh, I spent my money, I blocked off my calendar, and my 10-year-old laptop's not going to work, we're already introducing friction in the experience before they even get to even close to taking their exam. And so thinking about the when and the how that we're telling candidates information is just as important, at least to me and to us at HashiCorp, as what we're telling them. And then, on appointment day, probably the bulk of the question that you're asking, our goal, of course, is to minimize unnecessary distractions, frustration, and importantly for us, and things that we've seen with past vendors is loss of time. Anything that takes me as a candidate more time than what I allowed in my schedule is gonna cause stress. Maybe it's gonna impact performance, but it will definitely impact the candidate's perception of their performance. And sometimes that can be just as impactful, at least when it comes to, support tickets. And so how a candidate accesses their exam, how they join and their pre-flight experience, their proctor experience. Those are things that we want to be seamless in order to be really confident, I guess, that we're testing their product knowledge or, whatever the exam's about, and not like, can they navigate a website under duress? And so, from an admin perspective, I do a lot of support on our team. I would say this like perceived or real impact to performance on any delay, any frustration was a big driver of support tickets, and not just like any support ticket, the support tickets that take the longest, take the most investigation, have the candidates be most frustrated. And so if we're thinking about seamlessness across the appointment, we're also helping ourselves as well as the candidate. Post-appointment, people want their badges, right? It's like, give me my badge right now. Where is it? And so to go back to that common pitfall of not giving people the right information at the right time, if they don't already know when to expect their badge and where to expect it, or, if they fail their results, why they failed, you're again like causing friction in the experience itself. And so you mentioned confidence at the beginning. I think we're inspiring confidence in the candidates to perform well on the exam, very important. But thinking about the process end to end, we're also inspiring confidence in the program, inspiring confidence that the credential is meaningful and that we care about their exam experience. And so that's why I would think about it from pre to post experience all the way through.
Fantastic. Ruben, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like I think the way we've approached the user experience is that we are trying to put ourselves in our customer's brand, right? So like we want it's a really big deal. Like I think that especially now with social media and with test takers and professionals out there really voicing how they feel about their experience, and they can, right? They can put it into LinkedIn, they can put it into any other social media platform and talk about the experience. So you know we're we're very cognizant of that, and we want to make sure that like the way we've designed the whole entire system end to end is that we're very conscious of our customer's brand, right? And we want to make sure that like there's always positive things said on social media, specifically on social media because it's a very public area, or in Reddit or whatever.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I know, we gauge kind of like our success on making sure that the test takers are happy. Like all the time, it doesn't really matter if it's our fault or their fault. We always try to make sure that they're happy and that they leave happy. And sometimes, even in cases where there are technical issues, even from you're talking about like tickets and things like that, like we're okay with giving support vouchers even though it's not our fault, right? Because like at the end of the day, like we want those test takers to be happy. And I think that the user experience, that you talked about, Lauren, and allowing a test taker to go from start to finish without any technical issues or testing their systems out and stuff like that, it is super important. But also even just the amount of time that somebody has to like dedicate to get through the process, like even that, we've focused on that. And it's kind of crazy because like like I said, I always put myself in the shoes of the test taker. I always put myself in the shoes like of the customer, the subject matter expert or whatever. And I
Yeah.
always, I want to feel good about the experience. And we're even just trying to get the person down from 5 steps to 4 steps to 3 steps to be able to schedule the exam is a really big deal for us. And the other thing I was just going to kind of say about that is that we love it when test takers post about Certiverse, right? I mean, of course we've like every other program, things happen, but it's really important for us when somebody tags us and tags you or tags any of our other customers and say, this is such a big difference. This is like the, amazing experience from the last vendor or from my last experience, the last time I took an exam. Um, because we do see those negative posts about other platforms. And I think that it's, I don't know, you have these professionals to treat them like professionals,
Yeah.
give them the possible best experience that you can give them. And also, these are folks that are taking a lot of time, like you said, they're paying for these certifications. And, the last thing you want to do is to like, create more obstacles and more friction and make it more difficult for them to take their exams and complete their exams. So, I mean, I think you nailed it on that. It's really super important. And the stress level as well. That's just the biggest thing, right? Like we want them to get to the point where they start their exam and there's no stress.
Yeah, you reminded me when you were talking about the time that a candidate takes. We had a candidate tell us that with our old system, they would reserve 45 minutes to get up and running, talking to the proctor, like just for exam logistics. And
Mhm.
that was Certiverse. They did all of it in 9 minutes. So that's showing their room, everything from start to finish, getting ready for their exam. And that's really important to us as a company that has professional level exams that are 4 hours. If we're
Mhm.
then asking people to reserve another 45 minutes to do the logistics of, proctoring and getting set up, that's just not viable in any way, shape, or form for our program. So the time that it takes for a candidate is yeah, not to be ignored, especially for us.
Well, moving on to, we're actually kind of moving backwards a little bit into the actual development of the exam. And Ruben, we'll have you start off on this one just to discuss how are we thinking about the experience of actually developing the exam as far as getting, speed to market and being able to meet the time demands of clients, but also making sure that the subject matter experts are, having the ability to contribute their knowledge, even if they don't have experience in test development.
Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of like also ties back to like, just the user experience for the test takers, right? Because there's again, like where we developed the platform, we really thought about everybody's happiness level, I guess, or the user experience level for everybody, right? Not just for test takers, but also the professionals that are contributing content and helping us design, helping our customers design exams, as well as our customers, right? So like a lot of, I think, we focused on making the process efficient, but also making it easy and making it available to everyone, whenever they need to access it. So um, I would say like one of the areas where we focused on, again, trying to get subject matter experts to contribute and be productive is the whole kind of like model that we built around asynchronous exam development, where a lot of our subject matter experts are professionals. They're working, and to pull them out of their job to help them, to help them contribute their knowledge to a certification exam. It's a really difficult thing to do. So, using AI and guidance and all that stuff is what's helped us a lot, and also just making the process as easy as possible for them. The other thing that I was thinking about is that a lot of our customers send out uh, surveys at the end and asking them for feedback and so forth. And we've changed the traditional model of exam development, and we're really focused on making it more subject matter expert friendly. And we look at a lot of that feedback, and one of the things that I love to see, and we know that our platform, we're going to always continue to improve our platform, but I love seeing things like I will, I will participate and help you design and help you write another certification exam, but only if it's on the Certiverse platform, right? And that's a really big deal, right? Because that like the test taker side is you have returning customers, right? You have people that are happy, they're going to come back and they're going to, help you build and design that next certification exam. I would say like it's super important, because if you have somebody that comes back, it means that you're not out recruiting more subject matter experts, right? And that's where, it's costly, and and it takes a lot of time to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, Lauren, you're, not as involved on the side of it, but as far as,
Yeah.
discussion with your peers and the things that you've heard, is there anything additional that you have on that side that you would like to add?
Yeah, Ruben covered a lot of it, but you're right. I did collaborate with my colleague Ashley Norman, who does all of the exam development in Certiverse on our team. And a couple of things that she said stuck out to me, and also relate back to the candidate side of things too. Like Ruben was saying, having timely instructions in the product itself for SMEs, that helps contributors do what they need to do, but the customization of it also helps them have a higher level understanding of why they're doing what they're doing,
Mhm.
why they're writing an item in a certain way, how it fits into the broader exam creation process. And at least for the people that we work with, having that context for SMEs helps them understand what they're working towards. And we've seen that results in, a final product that has the level of integrity, validity that we require. So, just even things that feel little, but tooltips or instructions in the product themselves make a big difference to the exam integrity as a whole.
So you have been through this process, and so
Yeah.
for other organizations like yourself looking to modernize and innovate their programs, what are the key user experience improvements in particular that they should prioritize to make sure, to get, as you're saying, kind of the biggest bang for your buck,
Yeah.
and even those little things that, or the things that might seem small that actually
It
do
might
have
seem
a larger
small.
impact.
Yeah, you're right. We just went through a vendor change, and we started on Certiverse about a year ago. And so I could go on and on and on about all of the things that we thought about, but I narrowed it down a little bit. The first one that I hope I don't need to get into too much, but is accessibility, right? We need to be thinking about, is the product accessible itself? We only have so much control over that as the client, but also the processes we build around the product or, around our program. They need to be accessible. The next thing that stuck out to me when I was reflecting on our decision-making processes was navigation. Is it easy to get from one part of the system to another? Going from page to page or landing page to an app within Certiverse or to the exam itself. Are there jumps? Are there weird lags, weird changes in UI? You know, anything that creates time for someone to question what they're doing, puts doubt in a candidate or
Mm.
SME's mind that they're doing the right thing, that's a moment where they might abandon the process or they're going to be confused and write a ticket. Those are things we want to eliminate in making sure the navigation is seamless in order to minimize support tickets and then increase adoption. Similarly, but I think different enough, is consistency. I think with certification programs, what I know of others, but specifically for us too, candidates are moving between multiple systems. It's sort of just the way it is. They're going from your LMS or your candidate database to exam delivery. Then maybe they're going back to your LMS and then they're going to your credentialing system. And I think a lot of those things are sort of like a necessary evil, if you will, necessary neutral, maybe. So making the experience within each system as clear, consistent, easy, intuitive as possible becomes even more important so that there's not extra jumps and changes going around. Lastly, really quick, is integrations. Similar to consistency, but how does the exam delivery and development system integrate with the LMS, integrate with your Credly or your Credible, your credentialing system? Both from a user experience perspective, we think about these a lot, at least I do, from data perspective and from my perspective, how easy is it going to be for me to integrate all of these things? But thinking about it from the user's perspective too is really important to ask and be aware of when you're, considering a UX transformation for your program.
Awesome. That's extremely, extremely helpful feedback on the thoughts behind that and really the things that you've seen uh, be able to change in that program. Ruben, do you have, I know you have a chance to talk to a lot of people
I,
who are in kind of a similar situation or looking to move forward with their program. Are there other things to add as far as what they're, what would have the
yeah,
biggest impact for them?
I mean, I think that all the things that Lawrence talked about, integration, user experience, and just the getting a test taker from from one system to another and making sure the data comes back and all that stuff. I think that's really important. And one of the way kind of like the way I kind of like to present the way we've built and designed Certiverse is to, we're really trying to like expedite the process for the test taker. And I think sometimes programs don't realize how, when you don't have integrations or you have steps that are complicated, how like it, how much work, how much additional work it creates for the users. And one of the things that we see with like almost every single customer of ours that comes to the platform, joins it, gets they go in and set up their integrations, is that what they're able to do with a better experience is really focus on scale.
Yeah.
And to me, like that's a really big deal because like I remember Lauren when we were first talking to HashiCorp, over a year ago, um, and like just the number of support tickets that your organization had to deal with on a daily basis was pretty remarkable. It was really high, right?
Yep.
And even for us, we focus on trying to get those tickets down. Whether we look at ways to automate things, we look at we do a lot of analysis, and it's a really big deal because once I feel like the support tickets and candidates complaining, all that stuff, I feel like that's like noise for
Yeah.
programs. And while you're like focusing on trying to like quiet down the noise, you're not focusing on building more certifications, you're not focusing on launching your programs, doing updates to your program. And then I think staff is just spread thin across just dealing with support tickets and things like that. So like we take a lot of pride around that, just making sure like if we like we've it's been great like when we implement a feature, we automate something or we build in automatic support or whatever, or one of our product managers says, what if we did this into the let's add this to the email, and if we add this to the email, we should see like the user tickets go down. And it's amazing, like, there's some days where like we have no support tickets and it's kind of weird. Like we're like checking the platform to make sure like the support ticketing
Yeah.
system is not broken. But those are amazing days for us, right? Where it's just like and but I really do feel like scale is really important from that perspective, like allowing just really simple things like allowing somebody to get a receipt, allowing
Yeah.
somebody to change the VAT number on a receipt, they put a typo or there's stuff like that. Like those little things make such a big difference from a user experience perspective. And again, going back to the scale and focus and stuff like that, I think it's paramount to have that in place. And we see, just one other thing I was going to say, like um, we have customers that join the platform, and then as they're going through the onboarding process, they let us know like, oh, we built one certification exam last year, and it's pretty incredible. They just built one exam, and then they come and join Certiverse, they get onboarded, and then in 1 year they'll build 10 certification exams. And that to me is like, such a big deal, right? Because that's just something that's they wouldn't be able to do if had they, had they like have all the noise around them and trying to deal with all these tickets and stuff like that. It really allows organizations to focus on the actual certification program.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can testify to all of that. I was the main person doing support tickets before and after Certiverse, and I think it's like 50 or 60% decrease in tickets, but it's like 90% clarity of my mind because I'm not just like being yelled at all day. Um, you underestimate the effect that that has on you when you're just getting negativity all of the time. Most people are very nice. I'm being dramatic, but you know what I mean. The
Hmm.
mental space that you have, as well as the literal time that you have. And in my case, it's focusing on marketing and events and
Yeah.
stewardship. But for others, it's building new exams. Those things really are invaluable. And if you think about what your business goals are before going into starting a
Mhm.
transformation process like this, you can pinpoint what parts of the process are already sticky and start to smooth those out in order to scale in the way that the business needs.
I love that. And then what I was going to ask, like, would you say that like the tickets that, I mean, that's a pretty big significant reduction. Are those tickets that you're still working through? I would imagine that they're less like complicated
Oh,
situations or.
absolutely. Yeah, we've been able to decrease the ones that require so much hand holding. I don't know the number, but even
Mhm.
more than that 50% number. And now we deal with name changes. Those are
Mhm.
things that we're always going to have to deal
Yep.
with when we're thinking about security and getting names exactly right. And those are tickets that we have automations for on our end too. And so being able
Yeah.
to have time to build automation into our ticketing system is another, positive byproduct of yeah, just having the time and brain space to do it.
So you're saying you're not going to get a sad emoji with a name change request?
Yeah, no, exactly. No more sad emojis. I've gotten a few in my time.
Well, we just have a few minutes left, so if you are watching along and you do have questions that you would like to ask the panel, we do have uh, continuing questions we can provide, but if you have any of your own, feel free to put those into the chat. Otherwise, we will probably wrap up with, sort of on a unrelated note from, the security issues that do come up. That is sometimes a friction point as far as creating a good experience, but also maintaining security. So, what are the ways that you are, helping to strike that balance and making sure that it's not a uh, impediment to test takers or to subject matter experts as well. And Lauren, did you
Yeah,
want to start with that?
sure. I'm going to keep repeating myself, so I'm sorry, but the answer here is similar to other ones. The first thing that we do is try and set expectations up front, especially when it comes to identity things, having your ID, making sure it's valid, making sure your name's right. And the fact that we have to be consistent with those rules across our global program. So while your name might be Michael and you put it in the system as Mike, I, as someone who's familiar with the name Michael, might know that, but I'm not going to know that for someone whose name is in a different language. So how can we be consistent, but also set expectations up front where that consistency is coming from an equity perspective, is important to us. And then same thing going back to consistency. If everything else in the process is clear and easy and not frustrating, I think candidates have more willingness, more bandwidth to deal with having to look around the room or answer certain proctor questions than they would if they're already frustrated trying to get the system to start. And so I think that setting expectations and really thinking about the experience outside of security and making that as easy as possible, are two of the big ways that we think about finding that right balance.
That's a really good point. I didn't really think about that because your if you have the rest of the process working really smoothly, then you can have I think test takers are going to be less bothered with the additional security uh,
Exactly.
questions or process that you have later. I would say that one of the things that we look at as we implement security and other security technologies is that we still try to make the user experience work well with those security technologies, right? Because I think having adding more security and then making the process more challenging is it also just makes it creates like a negative feeling, right, for test takers. And I think that we get we get a lot of customers that have been moving over from other platforms, and they come in, they design, develop, launch new certification exams. But a lot of the customers that come over as well is that they really complain about just kind of the abrasiveness of a process that a test taker has to go through just to launch a sort of an exam and to get to go into the process. So we always take that into consideration, and even on some of the rules and things like that. But I also think, like, where as we kind of, we just raised $11 million, and part of what we're going to invest in is also adding just more user-friendly processes that wrap security in it to help, that have more automation in it as well, right?
Yeah.
So that we can really allow a test taker to go through the entire process without having to go through a lot of friction and a lot of variances and stuff like that, and make it easy for them as well. That's the goal. I think you had a question, Andrea.
Yeah, there's a question that came in, and I'm not sure actually, Lauren, if this is, I'm not sure what process you're using.
Yeah.
But the question was if there were any challenges to registering for an account on Certiverse if your systems are not supporting SSO. So I'm not sure if that's relevant to how you're doing signups or how you're
It's
using.
not quite because we do have SSO enabled, and so we specifically don't have candidates
Mhm.
register directly on Certiverse, register for an account directly on Certiverse. So maybe Ruben, I don't know if you can maybe speak to other
Yeah,
programs.
I would say like we probably have about, it's about 40% of our customers, 60% are using SSO or even more now. Like more and more customers use the SSO process just because, the customers are coming from, the test takers are coming from their learning management system or from their certification management system. And then they come into our process to schedule. I mean, we always encourage our customers to use SSO, and we don't even, for all new clients that sign up with us, we don't charge for SSO just because we want our customers to use that. It's just a better experience for everybody. You get the user account data, you get the authentication and so forth, and you can do deep links into exams and stuff like that. It's just a better experience. But for the customers that don't use SSO, I think the process is still pretty straightforward. It's not, we don't, one of the things that we've done with Certiverse, and I've noticed this with, like, the legacy vendors that are out there, is that they, just for you to create an account, like they ask you, like, I don't know, like 15 things, right? It's like first name, last name, your address, like your email, like your password. Like they ask you all these things, and that, you may or may not even take one exam, or you might take two exams, or you may not take an exam at all. You just want to see like availability.
Yeah.
And that process, I think, is burdensome. So the way we've designed the process is that we start with, if you're going to create an account, we just need your first name, your last name, and your email address. Create a password. We'll send you a verification just to make sure that you have, you're using a legitimate email address, and then that's it. And then, then after you go on, you can go and select the exam and stuff like that. And we may not ask you for your address unless we're taking payment, right? Because some of our customers, they take payment and stuff like that. So it is, I think, a better experience. And also, like, just allowing somebody to just quickly create an account if they want to just see if they can potentially take the exam tomorrow, right? Like, I mean, it would suck for me if I'm a test taker, I'm there going online, and I'm like, oh, I created my account. Can I take my exam tomorrow? No, the availability is not until a month. Like
Yeah.
that's just a horrible experience. Um, but anyways, just to answer your question, I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't think it's that complicated, or it shouldn't be that complicated.
And if it is, we'll fix it.
That's true.
Well, thank you again. We are at time. So if you do want to reach out to our panelists, of course, you can reach them on LinkedIn, or if you have specific questions, you can also send those to answers@certiverse.com. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you again to our panel, and see you soon.